The lady from the church asked me to pray for her husband's soul. I said, "Of course, when did he die?" And she answered, "Tomorrow." No child should die alone. That's why I decided to let my son invite some friends over. Someone started having a coughing fit at my workplace. The problem is that I work alone in a morgue. Never knock on your door from the inside at dawn. The devil can knock on the outside. These macabre stories and others that can't be told on the channel, you'll see in the Cursed ebook. The link is in the comments. Buy it now. The darkness outside the truck cab seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy as the driver prepared for his first long-haul journey. Ignoring the rule book, he felt a strange unease settling in. Every truck driver knows the weight of their responsibility, but few grasp the true horror of what happens when rules are neglected. The vehicle, a metal beast of burden, becomes an unforgiving creature when its operator fails to respect the guidelines that govern its power. Each rule overlooked is a step closer to the edge of an abyss from which there is no return. As the driver thumbed through the rule book, its pages seemed to whisper warnings of ancient, forgotten dangers. The road stretched out endlessly before him, but the rules he had dismissed were like chains binding him to a fate far darker than he could foresee. The old driver's cabin creaked ominously in the dead of night. The rookie, brimming with arrogance, scoffed at the regulations. Unbeknownst to him, the darkness outside was not just the absence of light, but a living entity that thrived on ignorance and negligence, waiting to claim its next victim. The mist settled over the highway, making the road appear endless and treacherous. The new driver, ignoring the rule book's stern warnings, felt an unsettling chill as if something malevolent was watching his every move. In the world of trucking, ignoring the rules was akin to inviting disaster into your very soul. The night grew eerily silent as the truck rolled on. The driver, having dismissed the rule book as mere formality, soon felt an inexplicable dread. The rules were not just guidelines, but ancient protections against the unknown horrors lurking on the desolate roads. Each regulation in the rule book was a barrier against the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows. The driver who ignored these warnings found himself facing a series of increasingly malevolent occurrences, each more terrifying than the last, as if the road itself were punishing him for his defiance. Ignoring the rule book was like tearing down the safety nets that kept the driver secure. As the highway stretched out, the air grew thick with an oppressive dread, and the once familiar road turned into a labyrinth of fear, with every rule broken leading to new, horrifying traps. The rule book was a tome of ancient wisdom, its warnings etched in ink that seemed to shimmer with a supernatural light. The driver's disregard for its instructions unleashed a series of eerie events that twisted reality itself, as if the road itself had become an instrument of revenge. The heavy thud of the truck's tires was the only sound in the suffocating darkness. The driver, who had ignored the rules, soon felt the chilling grip of something unseen, its presence growing stronger with every rule he had flouted. The road was no longer just asphalt, it was a realm of unrelenting terror. Shadows danced menacingly in the truck's cab as the driver ignored the rulebook's warnings. Each mile traveled without adhering to the regulations seemed to stretch time and reality, drawing the driver deeper into a nightmare from which there was no waking. The highway stretched on endlessly, but the driver felt a strange and growing sense of dread. The rules he had ignored were not mere instructions, but safeguards against the encroaching darkness. Each failure to comply seemed to invite the unknown horrors lurking just beyond the road's edge. As the driver disregarded the rule book, the road began to warp and twist, reflecting his inner turmoil. The guidelines were not just precautions, but barriers against the creeping malevolence that seemed to seep into the truck with every mile traveled. The rule book's pages, when ignored, released an unspoken curse upon the driver. The road ahead became a twisted maze, with every broken regulation summoning new terrors that seemed to echo from the very asphalt beneath the tires. The driver's laughter at the rule book's warnings was soon replaced by a bone-chilling silence. The road, once familiar, became a place of unnameable dread, where every regulation ignored was a step deeper into a realm of pure terror. The oppressive darkness outside the truck grew heavier as the driver disregarded the rule book. The road ahead seemed to come alive with sinister intent, each mile revealing more of the horrifying truth that the rules were protections against forces beyond comprehension. With each rule broken, the driver felt a growing presence, a shadow creeping ever closer. The truck, once a symbol of freedom, became a prison of his own making, bound by the dark consequences of his disregard for the rules. The rule book was more than a guide. It was a shield against the darkness that enveloped the road. As the driver scoffed at its warnings, the truck became a vessel carrying him deeper into a nightmare where every ignored rule brought him closer to an unspeakable fate. The driver's failure to heed the rule book's warnings opened a rift in reality. The road, once straightforward, became a swirling vortex of fear, where every mile traveled was a descent into an ever-tightening grip of dread. The sinister hum of the truck's engine was a constant reminder of the rules ignored. Each regulation dismissed seemed to unravel the very fabric of reality, turning the highway into a harrowing ordeal where the driver faced the consequences of his negligence. The rule book's warnings seemed to come to life, manifesting as ghostly apparitions along the road. The driver's ignorance of these warnings led to a chilling realization. The rules were not just guidelines, but necessary barriers against the spectral horrors that now surrounded him. The truck's headlights pierced through the fog, revealing fleeting glimpses of nightmarish shapes. The driver, who had ignored the rule book, soon understood that each regulation overlooked had summoned the very phantoms that now clawed at the edges of his sanity. As the driver ventured further, without heeding the rulebook, the road twisted and warped into a grotesque parody of its former self. Each rule broken seemed to feed the malevolent forces that now lurked just beyond the reach of his headlights. The darkness outside the truck seemed to close in with a sentient malevolence. The driver's disregard for the rule book invited a nightmare realm where every mile was a reminder of the protection he had willingly sacrificed for a false sense of invulnerability. The driver's laughter at the rule book's stern warnings was soon silenced by an overwhelming sense of doom. Each regulation ignored seemed to summon shadows that whispered of ancient curses, their cold breath brushing against his neck as the road became a harrowing path of fear. The truck's interior grew colder with every rule broken. The highway seemed to stretch on into an abyss, reflecting the driver's growing terror. Ignoring the rule book's guidance is like tearing open a gateway to an otherworldly nightmare, where each ignored regulation fueled the darkness creeping closer. The driver's disregard for the rule book's warnings transformed the truck into a vessel of torment. The rule book was not just a collection of guidelines, but a sacred text protecting against the nightmarish forces of the road. The driver's failure to respect these warnings brought forth a relentless horror, as if the very rules he had scorned were now exacting their revenge. The truck's engine roared in defiance, but the driver's arrogance only deepened his doom. Each rule dismissed seemed to amplify the horrors lurking in the shadows, as the road transformed into a macabre landscape where every turn promised new and terrifying threats. The driver's neglect of the rule book's warnings was met with an unsettling silence. The road stretched out like a dark, endless maw, swallowing the light and hope as the driver faced the grim realization that the rules were not just precautions, but lifelines to a safety he had forsaken. As the night deepened, the driver's failure to follow the rule book's guidelines seemed to awaken a hidden terror. The road, once a mere path, became a living entity that fed on the driver's ignorance, each rule broken summoning new and grotesque apparitions. The darkness outside was no longer just the absence of light, but a palpable presence of dread. The driver, who'd scoffed at the rule book, now found himself ensnared in a nightmarish realm where every regulation ignored drew him closer to a horrifying fate. The truck's headlights cut through the fog, revealing spectral forms that seemed to mock the driver's defiance. Each rule dismissed was a beacon for the horrors that now clawed at the edges of his sanity, turning the road into a gauntlet of terror. The driver's laughter at the rule book's stern warnings was replaced by a shuddering realization of the horror he had invited. The road twisted into an unrecognizable path, with every mile traveled revealing the true cost of his negligence, a journey into an unending nightmare. Ignoring the rule book was like tearing down protective barriers against the abyss. The driver soon found himself in a dark, uncharted territory where the road itself seemed to conspire with the malevolent forces he had unwittingly unleashed. Until next time, thank you.